Begin. Today's daf is Chaf Aleph 21, and we're going to start with daf Chaf Amid Beis. And we had seen that in the Mishnah, Rabbi Yossi quoted Rabbi Yehoshua, who he said was lenient in regards to when you have a doubt of whether something is teruma tamea, whether it become impure teruma, whether you're allowed to burn it, that you're allowed to burn it together with teruma, that's already for sure tameh. And in a statement of a brisa, we had Rabbi Yossi say that you may not, and we interpreted that to say that there are two opinions of what the opinion of Rabbi Yeshua was. Rabbi Yossi said that Rabbi Yeshua was strict, and even in a state of doubt, you could not burn some teruma together with a for sure, with a certainly tameh teruma. Whereas Rabbi Shimon said that no, Rabbi Yeshua allowed, since there's already a state of doubt, maybe this is tameh, you can burn it together with something that's certainly tameh. And then we also brought proof that in certain cases Rabbi Yeshua allows to actively cause the tumah. And the Gemara explained that the reason for that is in that case where the wine was falling into a wine of teruma was falling into mundane, simple chulin wine, that was tameh. And since it's tameh, the wine, the teruma falling in would render the wine totally unusable for two reasons, two components. One, because it's tameh, and teruma that's tameh may not be eaten at all. And the second component, the Gemara is later going to tell us, is the teruma was a great, significant enough amount that it's not nullified in the tumah, in the tameh wine, and therefore the wine is going to become unusable. A kohen can't eat it because it's tameh, and a non-kohen can't eat it because it's teruma. And so nobody's going to be able to use it, and it's going to be complete loss. And the Gemara said, to save a great loss of a financial loss like that, you're allowed to actively go take a vessel and save the teruma from mixing, because in any case the teruma is about to become tameh. Then the Gemara is going to prove this idea that lehefsid meruba, to a great loss, a financial loss, the Chachamim allowed us to do this, but they were not so concerned with a minor loss, and that's where we're up to. Uminat Tamra. This is about 12 lines from the bottom of Chafam at base. Uminat Tamra the lehefsed meruba chashashu lehefsed muad lachashashu. And how can we prove that? Where do we know this from? That Chachamim were concerned with a significant monetary loss, but not with a minor monetary loss. The Tanya we learned the same exact scenario that we were talking about in the wine, where you had the wine in the upper press and it was coming down the trough into the lower press, and it was going to fall in, and it's teruma falling into a tameh chulin, and it's going to become unusable, and it's going to be a total loss. And so you're allowed to, Rabbi Yeshua says, go and get your tameh vessel and put it in front of the wine to protect it from falling in. Whereas in oil, we're about to see, he says he agrees you're not allowed to. And what's the distinction? And the Gemara is going to explain. The Tanya we learned chavish shel shemen teruma, oil of teruma, a barrel full of it, shenishbara begas elyona, in the upper press, it broke and now is leaking out, ubetachtena chulin tameim, and it's leaking out and running down the trough into the lower press, into the pit where the oil sits. Now, in there is already oil, but it's tameh. It's not teruma, but it is tameh. So only it has a smaller market. Only somebody that's tameh can use it. Moeder Rabbi Eliezer or Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua agree, and the Gemara later is going to ask. It should say Rabbi Yeshua agrees to Rabbi Eliezer, not the other way around. Rabbi Eliezer agrees to Rabbi Yeshua. So Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua agree that if you have enough time to run and get a tahor vessel, a vessel that is pure, and with that, you'll be able to save some of the teruma. So then you must go ahead and do it. As long as you could save a revius, which is approximately 3 ounces, go ahead and do it. Yatzil, save it. Ve'im lav tered v'tit mavaltet amenu. And if not, allow it to go down and do not actively cause tumah. And this is different than by wine, where Rabbi Yeshua said you're allowed to actively cause a tumah in order to save the teruma from going in. So so what are you going to tell me is the distinction? Wine, you have some usage for it, because even though teruma tamea may not be consumed as food, however, teruma that is tameh, while you burn it, the kohen is allowed to benefit from the fuel. And so while he's burning it, which is what you're supposed to do with tameh teruma, the kohen is allowed to benefit from it. And so it's not such a tremendous loss, because you could still sell it to a kohen as fuel. The wine also has a usage. They used to, in order to bring to mask the odors of rooms, they would take wine and they would spritz it around the room, and that would cause a better fragrance than what was there. So you can use that wine as well. And if you tell me, well, this is not a significant enough thing, and therefore the wine is completely lost, that you drink wine as long as the price is one selah for a lug, for a measurement. However, for ziluf, for this good aroma in the room, for that you're going to pay double the price for the wine. You're going to pay, or buy wine for 2 selah per lug. So the Gemara says, yeah, but this is new wine. It's new wine and is not really appropriate for aroma. It doesn't give enough. It doesn't have enough. It's not developed enough to have a good, as say in the wine world, it doesn't have a good nose. It's not worthy yet for that. Well, Royally Ashna says, so what? So just hold on to it for a bit, leave it in a barrel, let it age, and then you'll have a good wine. That, even though you're not allowed to drink it because it's teruma tamea, but you can use it for the aroma of sprinkling around the room. And I said, no, you can't leave teruma, which only a kohen is allowed to have, and tameh, which even a kohen may not have. So nobody's allowed to drink this. You can't leave that around. Somebody's going to come and drink from it, and that's a Torah prohibition. You can't have that. So Gemara says, well, Shemanami also well, what about the wine? The oil also, if you leave it around for someone to use as fuel for a fire, that's also a potential danger. Someone's going to use it. The oil, you can put it into a non-drinking vessel, a non-food grade vessel, where people will use it for fuel, but no one's going to use it for their salad or for food. Wine also, just put it into an unclean vessel, and then nobody's going to drink from it. Anyone says that's silly. The whole reason you want to keep the wine is for it to develop a good smell, so that you can send it around, sprinkle it around the room, and it'll give a good scent. You want it to spritz around the room. The klimos, you're going to put it into a disgusting vessel that's going to ruin the whole thing. Now, this idea that you can't leave something around because maybe it's going to cause a takala, a stumbling block, and somebody's going to come to eat from it. This takana, the takala atzma tanoi, that this concern is actually a machlokas tanoim, whether or not we have that as a concern. The Tanya we learned. You have a barrel of wine. It's of teruma. Only a kohen is allowed to partake in it, and it became tameh. It became impure, and so no one's allowed to drink from it. Beishami Amr to Shafich Chevel. Beishami say it's got to be all poured down immediately. It has to be tossed as one. Dump the whole thing. And Meisilo say, no, you can use it as a spritz around the room right now. So Rabbi Shmuel bar Yossi said, I can make a compromise between the two opinions. If it's out in the field, pour it right away, because you're not going to sprinkle it for an aroma, because in the field you're not going to do that. You only do that in a house for the smell. So we're afraid somebody's going to drink from it. You got to pour it right away. But if it's in the house, there you're allowed to use it to spritz around the room, and whatever's left, you're going to toss. And and some say what he said was, if it's new, so there's no point in sprinkling around the room because it's not going to give a good scent, a good aroma, and so therefore spill it all out right away. However, if it's an old wine, so it's aged, it's going to have a good scent, so that you should spritz around the room and only then spill out the rest. Either way, so Rabbi Yossi had this compromise. Amrullah, they said to him, "Ein hachra shlishis machras." You're a third opinion. You're not actually a hachra, a compromise. And we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. There's a halachic idea that when there's a machlokes, two opinions, and someone can make a compromise which says this opinion is true here and this opinion is true here, that the halacha is like the compromise. However, in order for it to qualify as a compromise, it actually has to use something that was already a part of the opinion. So if Beis Shammai had said, both whether it's at home or in the field, old wine or new wine, you got to pour it all out right away. And Beis Hillel say old wine, new wine, in the house, in the field, you can do a spritz. So then you can tell me, okay, they're arguing at two extremes, and Rabbi Yossi Bar Rishmael, Rabbi Yossi made a compromise. He said, well, out in the field or a new wine, they were going to toss it right away. An old wine or out in a house, then we're going to use it for a spritz. So that would be a compromise. However, Beis Shammai didn't mention anything about fields or houses. They just said it's got to be tossed. So he's creating a new distinction that wasn't there beforehand. That's not considered a compromise. That's actually a new opinion, and that doesn't count. So we are at the top line of the Chaf Aleph, Amud Aleph, 21a. Amar Rabbi Yossi ben Rabbi Chanina. Rabbi Yossi ben Rabbi Chanina said, "Machlokes shenaflu lepachas mimea." This machlokes about the upper wine coming down the trough into the lower wine is only talking about where there's so much wine in the teruma that it'll be more than 1% of what's going to be in the lower in the tamei wine. Shenaflo pachas mimeya, so it's going to be less than 1 in 100. Mimeya se'ah chulin tamein, then 100 measure of the mundane wine, non-teruma wine, that is tamei. Aval naflo lameya chulin tameim dirakol teri. But if it'll be less than 1% of the wine that's in the bottom, so even when it falls in, it becomes totally nullified. Even though you may know, as a general rule, the number for nullification is 1 in 60. For teruma, the nullification number is 1%, 1 in 100. And therefore, he says that if the wine that's in the teruma is so small in a number that it's going to be less than 1% in the wine that's tamei, so the teruma is not going to prohibit the wine because it's going to be nullified in there. And so you can't actively cause tuma to the teruma because it's not going to. There's no loss. We just said earlier the reason Rabbi Yeshua is going to allow you to bring your vessel that's tamei and put it underneath the trough to catch the teruma that's falling in. And by doing so, you're actively causing tuma to the teruma. The reason why he allows us to do it is because you're saving the great significant loss of the 100 measure of or 99 measure of wine that's down in the pit, the wine pit, and that's a significant loss. However, if you have 100 times the barrel, you have 100 times that, so the wine itself is going to be, the teruma wine is going to be nullified in the tamei wine, so there's no loss. And if there's no loss, you can't actively cause teruma, and therefore everybody's going to agree. Divrei hakol tered v'titma v'al titamena biyad. let it fall in, let it become tummy on its own, let it become nullified within there, and do not actively cause tumah to it. Tanya Nami, indeed we have a brisa like this. A barrel that became that broke in the upper press, and the lower press, meaning the wine pit, is full of mundane, non-teruma tame wine that is impure but mundane, not teruma. Rabbi Eliezer agrees to Rabbi Yehoshua that if you could, you're going to try and save as much as you can with a pure vessel. And if not, let it fall in and let it become nullified and tamei, and it doesn't make a difference because it's nullified. So now the Gemara challenges what we said, that both these brises had the text. Rabbi Eliezer agrees to Rabbi Yehoshua that you allow it to fall. That should be the other way around. Rabbi Eliezer is the one that said you always have to let it fall in and not actively cause tumah. Rather, what it should read is Rabbi Yehoshua agrees to Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Yeshua usually says, in order to save the wine, you're allowed to actively cause tumah to the teruma by catching it in a tummy vessel. Here he says, no, let it fall in because it's going to be nullified in this last case, and in the previous case he says you can leave it because it's oil, and it's not a significant loss. So hi, Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yeshua, it should be the other way around. Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Eliezer, Amar Rava Epoch. So Rava said you're right. The text is incorrect, and you have to switch the text to say Rabbi Yeshua agrees to Rabbi Eliezer. However, Rav Huna Bereder Rav Yeshua Amar. No, you don't have to switch the text, and it's referring to a different part of the brisa. It's not talking about the last part. It's the other way around. And in the first part of the brisa, it says that if you can save enough of the wine in a pure vessel, even though most of it's going to go to waste, but you can save some. As long as you could save some teruma, that's more valuable than the rest of it because you can save teruma. Teruma is holy. So you need to do that. Now, what about a vessel that the outside is tamei and the inside is tahor? And we saw rabbinically when there's a tuma, generally we say any vessel that became tamei entirely became tamei. However, the Chachamim wanted to distinguish between a rabbinic tuma and a oraisa tuma, Torah level tuma. And so they made a rule that if the tuma touches the outside of a vessel, the inside remains tahor. So you can save the teruma inside the inner vessel, inside this vessel where the inner is pure. However, there's a concern that maybe it'll touch the outside as well and become tamei, and you're going to actively cause tuma to the teruma that way. So he said that Rabbi Eliezer agrees to Rabbi Yeshua that you can do that and not worry about the inadvertent act of causing of tumah. Maybe the teruma is going to touch the outside. Kamash Malan, that even Rabbi Eliezer was not concerned with this and allowed for this. With this, we complete the section of Rabbi Chanina Skana Kahanim, the 7 blot on Tuma and Tahara in liquids and in burning Teruma Tamea on Erev Pesach together with Teruma Tahora, and complete the first chapter, the first perek of Pesachim. Hadran Alach or L'Arba Asar, we shall come back to you, or L'Arba Asar, we begin the second perek, which deals with not the checking of chametz on beforehand, but with the prohibition of chametz once the prohibition sets in. So beforehand, we were talking about checking for chametz and getting rid of chametz, and here we get to the moment that chametz becomes prohibited. So the Mishnah begins: Kol shah shamuta le'echol ma'achil lebehema. Anytime that you're allowed, that there is a permission to eat chametz, there is you're allowed to feed it to your animals. The Gemara is going to ask, this is a peculiar way of saying this. You should say, when you eat, you can give to eat. Why does it say when it's permissive to eat? The Gemara is going to explain. So you can feed it lebehema, lachai, la'of, to your animal, to your wild animal, to your domesticated animal, wild animal, and to birds. And you can even sell it to a non-Jew. And you're allowed to benefit from it. Avar zman. But once the time is over, the permission to eat ends. At this point, asaban asa. Not only is it prohibited, but you're not allowed to benefit from it as well. You're not allowed to heat your oven with it. And the Gemara is going to say, obviously, if I can't benefit from it, I can't use it as fuel in my oven. Rabbi Yehuda says the only way to get rid of chametz at that moment, at that time, is by burning it. The Chachamim disagree. They say you can crumble it up and toss it into the wind, or you can just toss it into the sea. That also would be a valid form of ridding chametz, your property, your possession of chametz. You don't have to burn it. So the Gemara says, it should say, in our Mishnah, it says, when there is permission to eat, you're allowed to give it as animal food. Means if you're not allowed to eat it, you can't give it to your animal. Now, when is this? We saw in the previous parak that Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Meir have a disagreement. Rabbi Yehuda says that you have 2-hour buffer zone from noon when the Torah prohibition of chametz sets in. 2 hours prior to that, you have to stop eating chametz. You have another hour that you, even though you can't eat the chametz, you're allowed to feed it to your animals. And then an hour before the prohibition time is when you actually have to burn the chametz or get rid of the chametz. Rabbi Meir says, no, they come at the same time. You can eat and feed the animals all at the same time. So whose opinion is this? This seems to be the opinion of Rabbi Meir. Lema Maslita, the like Rabbi Yehuda, and our mission is not like Rabbi Yehuda. The Rabbi Yehuda, because if it is like Rabbi Yehuda, because then the 5th hour of the day, which means from 10 o'clock to 11 o'clock, if noon was halachic noon. So from 10 o'clock to 11 o'clock, which is the 5th hour into the day, 6 to 7, 7 to 8, 8 to 9, 9 to 10, 10 to 11, the 5th hour of the day, you're allowed to allowed to eat as well as feed it to your animals. And Rabbi Yehuda says you're not allowed to eat; you're only allowed to feed it to your animals. The Tanan, as we learn, Rabbi Meir says you eat the entire 5th hour. You're allowed to eat it, and only at the end of the 5th hour, beginning of the 6th hour, meaning at 11 o'clock, is when you have to burn the chametz, and then you can't eat it anymore. And Rabbi Yehuda says the 4th hour of the day you're allowed to eat it up until 10 o'clock. And from 10 to 11, you're not allowed to eat it, but you're allowed to feed it to your animals. And at 11 o'clock, the beginning of the 6th hour of the day, you have to burn it. So, and what's the problem? Okay, so then the halach is like Rabbi Meir. But the reason this is a question is because we saw in the previous parak that the halach is like Rabbi Yehuda, that you may not eat chametz you need a 2-hour buffer for eating chametz, and you only burn it an hour before noon. Velamai Rabbi Meir. So if you want to tell me, okay, so then our Mishnah is Rabbi Meir, can't be. Hai kol shosha mutelechel machil, kol shosha eichel machil mibayli. Why did it say anytime that there's a permission to eat it, you're a chametz, you're allowed to feed it to your animals? It should say when you eat chametz, you can feed it to your animals. Amar Rabba Bar Ula. So Rabba Bar Ula said Masnita Rabbi Gamliel. So there's a third opinion in the previous Mishnah that makes a distinction. It says, Rabbi Yehudi, you are right that at the end of the 4th hour, beginning of the 5th hour, which we call 10 o'clock, you are not allowed to eat chametz anymore. You have to stop eating chametz unless it's teruma. Teruma is holy, and a kohen is only a kohen's allowed to eat it, and you shouldn't just waste it and let it go to be burned if it's edible. So the kohen has an additional hour that he's allowed to eat teruma, that's chametz. That's what it means in our Mishnah here. As long as there's permission to eat, meaning someone else has permission to eat this, a kohen may eat teruma, that's when you're still allowed to feed it to your animals. Rabbi Gamliel here, the Tanah Rabbi Gamliel Omer, chulin ha'ne'echolin kol arba, teruma kol chamish. However, teruma, you're allowed to eat the 5th hour as well. The sarvim b'tchila sheish, and at 11 o'clock, the beginning of the 6th hour is when you burn it all. V'hachi ka'amar, and this is the meaning of our Mishnah. Kol shasham mutalechel koyim b'teruma, and as long as there's permission to eat chametz, meaning someone has right to eat chametz, a kohen is allowed to eat teruma. Therefore, Yisrael machil chulin lebehema, non-teruma produce, you're not allowed to eat anymore. But anybody, even in Yisrael, is allowed to give it to his animal to eat, because there's somebody that's allowed to eat teruma. Now, so the Gemara says, "L'chaya la'ofes lamali lemisni." L'chaya la'ofes, you're allowed to give it to animals as well and birds. Now, lamali lemisni behema, lamali lemisni chaya. Why do I have to tell in our Mishnah you're allowed to give it to the domesticated animals and to wild animals? What's the distinction? Tzricha, I need them both. The Tana behema, if it had just said domesticated animals, the imashayra chazile, because if it would leave over, I would see it and I'll go clear it up and burn it. But if I give it to a weasel, I give it to a cat, I give it to some other animal, they may hide it and I won't know where they hid it. Maybe I'm not allowed to give it to them. Therefore, it says in the Mishnah, I'm allowed to feed it to them. And if it only said wild animals, mishum the imashayra miyamitza, because it won't be out in the open. So if it leaves it all out, it's nullified with my nullification. And it's not going to be out in the open. There's no concern of Bal Yirah Bal Matzah that I may come to see it and own it on Yantiv. But the animal may leave it over, and because I think it ate it, I don't go to check. And if I didn't nullify it, I will transgress Bal Yirah Bal Matzah. So perhaps you're not allowed to leave this for the animal. You're not allowed to feed a domesticated animal. Tzricha, that's why it has to say wild animals as well as domesticated animals, you're allowed to feed that fifth hour of the day. Why do I have to tell you birds? Birds obviously is not a concern. I did the if you're right, that's a part of the, once you say wild domesticated animals, wild animals, well, behema chaya sort of goes in the mix as well. A machra lenachri. And I'm allowed to sell it to a non-Jew. Now, if I'm allowed to benefit from it, I'm allowed to feed it to animals, I can sell it to a non-Jew. Pshita, of course. Why shouldn't I be allowed to sell it? Because it wants to tell you that, as opposed to, there is an opinion that you're not allowed to sell it. The Tanya, because we learned in a brisa, Beishamei are of the opinion that the mitzvah upon us to get rid of chametz is such that we have to get rid of it in a manner that if we give it to someone who won't get rid of it before Pesach, we're not allowed to do that. We have to get rid of the chametz. And so you can't sell it to a non-Jew, because if you sell it to a non-Jew, he will maintain it on Pesach. And our mitzvah is to get rid of it. Cease it to be. It has to not be there anymore. The Bishami you have to know when you sell it that it will be consumed and completed before Pesach. Beis Hillel saying, no, your obligation is not to make sure the chametz ceases to be, and it ceases to be yours is all the mitzvah is. It's not yours in your possession. So if you sell it to someone else, that's enough. Mutar limkar, so you're allowed to sell it as well. Now we turn to Chaf Aleph Amud Beis. Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseru mekutach v'chamini kutach asalim k'shloshim kodem Pesach. Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseru, who follows the opinion of Beis Shammai on this, says therefore, foods that take a long time to eat, chametz foods like kutach, which is a dip that's made of moldy bread and sour milk that they used to eat in Babylon and Bavel, and it was a dip, so you wouldn't eat a lot of it at a time. It was sort of like it would take a long time to get rid of. So you can't sell it 30 days before Pesach because you can't be sure that it will be completed before Pesach comes. The second line of Chav Aleph Amud Beis, and it says that you're allowed to benefit from it at that time. Pshita, of course, you just said I can sell it, you can feed it to my animals. Of course, it's permissible and benefit. What it means is not that it's permissible to benefit from it at that hour. If you burn it now, partially, you're allowed to benefit from it even after time. Like Rava said, if you burnt it before the Pesach, the prohibition time set in, you're allowed to benefit from it after the time came in because it's no longer called chametz, and you can use it as fuel even after the time of prohibition sets in. So that means you burn your chametz at 11, and now the chametz is completely scorched and not edible. And now you want to continue using it as fuel in your fireplace after 12 o'clock, when the prohibition of chametz sets in, you're allowed to because it was already ruined before the prohibition set in. However, the Mishnah said if the time had already set, the time of prohibition sets in, you're not allowed to benefit from it. So again, Pshita, that seems pretty obvious. You just said I can only feed it to my animals and sell it and benefit from it before the time, meaning once the time sets in, it's prohibited even in benefit. What means that even though the Torah prohibition only sets in at 12 o'clock, at noon, halachic noon, an hour beforehand, or let's call it 11 o'clock, the rabbinic prohibition sets in. And this tells us that there is a prohibition of benefit even at that moment that's rabbinic in prohibition. That the time, it's an hour buffer because people may confuse the time from noon. So therefore, even an hour beforehand, you're not allowed to benefit. You can no longer sell it. And as we'll see, the Amar of Gidla, Amar Rav Chiya, Rav Yosef, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Hamakadesh Mesheser Shoyes Halamalo, anybody that makes kiddushin, he betroths a woman with chametz, even if it's chitik, afili chitik kurdenaisen, even if it's with a hardened wheat. Nevertheless, since it is chametz or could be chametz, therefore the kiddushin cannot take effect. In choshen the kiddushin does not take effect because rabbinically this is already, the chametz is already prohibited. Now, even though that on a d'oraisa level, on Torah level, the kiddushin should take effect because it's not yet prohibited, but the chachamim made it prohibited, and therefore it no longer has any value. You're not allowed to benefit from it, and the chachamim have the ability to make it ownerless from your possession and essentially seizing that item from you. It's not yours anymore, and therefore the kiddushin cannot take effect. You betroth this woman with a silo full of wheat an hour, within that hour that rabbinically chametz is prohibited already, the kiddushin does not take effect. As romantic as that kiddushin is, it didn't work. It also says that you're not allowed to use it, not only you're not allowed to benefit from it, you're also not allowed to use it as fuel in your oven. Gemara says, Pshita, of course, you just said it's not allowed, I'm not allowed to benefit from it. Lo tzricha, so no, I need it for this case. Lo Rabbi Yehuda de Ama in bir chametz ala sreifa. I need it for the case of Rabbi Yehuda, who says that the only way to the mitzvah, the only way to fulfill the mitzvah of making chametz to cease being in your possession is to burn it. Therefore, I may have thought, since Rabbi Yehuda says that the mitzvah is to burn it up, that's the way to get rid of chametz. So then I'm doing a mitzvah, so perhaps I'm allowed to benefit from it. Kamash Malon, it tells you I'm not allowed to. Now, the Gemara is going to begin a lengthy discussion about an important halachic topic, a machlokas that we're going to have here, that when the Torah says something is prohibited to be eaten, you're not allowed to eat something. Does that mean I'm not allowed to eat it or I'm not allowed to benefit from it? So Omar Chizkiya says, he says, how do I know that chametz is prohibited in benefit for Pesach? We just said that once the moment of chametz prohibition sets in, I'm not allowed to benefit. I can't sell it. I can't feed it to my animals. No benefit. Okay, how do we know this? Shenema. He says, because the Torah says, lo ye'achel chametz. The Torah doesn't say, lo yochal chametz, don't eat chametz. It's reflexive. It shall not be made eaten. Okay, it shall not be eatenized. So what does that mean? Lo yehei by heter achila. There should be no way to make it edible. So it means don't allow it to serve your food needs. You can't even sell it. That's going to be able to give you some other food to eat. Don't barter it. Don't sell it and then buy something else with it. It's prohibited and benefited entirely. The unique form of that word, lo ye'achel, tells you it cannot feed you, meaning it cannot be sold and then the money used for food. And so the reason is because the Torah said it in such a unique form, lo ye'achel chametz. If it had not written it this way, it would just say, don't eat. Then I would say it only is prohibited in eating, but you're allowed to benefit from chametz. You can sell chametz, you just can't eat it. And there are other prohibitions like that. And that would be a disagreement with Rabbi Abba, who is of the opinion that no, whenever the Torah says you may not eat something, it includes a prohibition of benefit, unless the Torah explicitly says you're allowed to benefit. And he learns it from nevela. Nevela is an animal that did not die by shechita, by shechting it properly. It died either on its own, it's roadkill. It was, you tried slaughtering it, but did it wrong. It's nevela. That's called nevela. The Torah says about nevela, don't eat it. You may sell it. You may give it to a ger, which is a citizen who has chosen to live in Eretz Yisrael on the conditions of no idolatry. And that's a ger, and it is incumbent upon to take care of them, other, even though they're not Jewish, they're living amongst us, and it's they're a ger toshav, and so we would gift it to them, or machar l'nachri, or you would sell it to a non-Jew, even someone who is not living amongst us. Now, the fact that the Torah had to tell us that I can gift it to someone or sell it tells me that if not for that, the fact that the Torah said lo ye'achel, it may not be eaten, is enough to tell me that it's prohibited in benefit as well. And that's why the Torah had to come back and say, oh, by the way, even though I said lo yochel, don't eat it, which would mean don't benefit from it. In this case, you're allowed to gift it to your neighbor or allowed to sell it to someone else. The Amar Rabbi Abba said, whenever it says do not eat, you shall not eat, they shall not eat. It means both a prohibition in food as well as benefit. Until the Torah explicitly tells you you're allowed to benefit, such as like the Torah did in regards to nevela. The Tanya, as we learned, do not eat any nevela. Rather, to the foreigner that's in your gates, meaning a ger toshav, an inhabitant that has accepted not to do idolatry and lives amongst us, titanena, you shall give it to him. Va'achla, and he can eat it. Or machar l'nachri, or you can sell it to a non-Jew. And in the Brisa, it says that actually there are two opinions. Is this specific, or really it's either or is okay? Meaning, ainli ela l'ger b'nesina. It only said that I gift it to a ger, l'nachri b'mechira, or I can sell it to a foreigner, to a non-Jew. L'ger b'mechira, how about can I sell it to the ger toshav, to the inhabitant that lives next to me that is not Jewish? Menayin, how do I know that I can sell it to him? Read the verse this way: to the ger toshav that sits amongst you, that's in your gate, you shall gift it to him or sell it. Now, lenachri b'nesina menayin, and how do I know that I can gift it to someone, just a foreigner, not someone who is ger toshav, someone who is accepted to live amongst us without idolatry? Menayin tamalamed titanena va'achla oimachal lenachri. Again, read the verse also this way: you will gift it to him or sell it to the foreigner. So from this we can learn, so you can sell it or gift it to either a ger toshav or a foreigner or non-Jew. Different Rabbi Meir, that's what Rabbi Meir says. Rabbi Yehuda, however, Rabbi Yehuda says no. The Dvarim Kichsavim, the Torah means what it said. Leger b'nesina. You have to either gift it to the ger toshav, or sell it to a nachri, to a foreigner, a non-Jew. My time at Rabbi Yehuda. Now, what's the reasoning of Rabbi Yehuda? That he says that the Torah is as it's written. Because because if it's true, like Rabbi Meir said, that you can either gift it or sell it to either one of these types of people, as long as they're not Jewish, whether they have accepted to live amongst us without idolatry or not, you can sell it or gift it to either one. So then let the Torah write it that way. To the ger, which is in your gates, you will gift it to him or sell it to him. Why did it say, or sell it to a non-Jew? It must be that the Torah means specific. Either you gift it to a ger toshav, or you sell it to a nachri. The Rabbi Meir, And Rabbi Meir says, Oy lahaktim. No, the reason the Torah wrote it this way is it wants to tell you that even though you have a potential buyer who can buy the nevela from you, you're better off gifting it to a ger toshav who dwells near you, to the foreigner who is accepted to live without idolatry amongst us, to the ger toshav. Lahaktim nasina de ger lemechira de nachri. Why? Because the Torah says that there is a the Torah says that he has to ger toshav v'cheimach, that the foreigner shall live amongst you and you have to take care of him to help him live. And so therefore, it's better to gift it to him if he needs it rather than to sell it to a foreigner. Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Yehuda says, right, since the Torah already says that you're obligated to take care of him, I don't need another pasuk to tell me that you're better off, you'd rather gift it to the ger toshav. I already know that. The Torah says, Kivan the ger at the matzuv l'achayoseh, since the Torah already set an obligation that you have to take care of your neighbor, even if he's not Jewish, but if he's a ger toshav, you have to take care of him to make sure that he can survive and he has what to eat. So of course you have to gift it to him before you sell it to a non-Jew. Because you're not obligated to take care of some foreigner. Let's our cross. So therefore, I don't need a verse for that. Svarahu. It's a simple logic. Now, Bishlam Rabbi Meir Dama Echad Ger Echad Nachri Be'Merchi Be'Nasina. It's a kral Lemeshri Nevela Bahana. So according to Rabbi, let's leave this for tomorrow because we're going to get into the rest of the discussion. We'll end it for tonight.